Welcome, everyone. This is Creativity Hive's weekly show, and I'm Miriam Haugen, one of the founders. Today we have Premiere Pro Secrets, and brought to you by Mo and Neil. And Mo, you are up first, so I'm going to bring him in here. Good morning.
Hi everyone.
Or evening, whatever time it is.
Yeah, it's now 8 p.m. in a very cold and wet Cape Town, so not so nice weather, but great to be here.
Because it's winter time for you,
Yeah, it
right?
looks like I'm in the middle of Alaska, and it's quite cold. Yes, it is winter here. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and we're basking in summer here. So
Mm.
I'll let you take it away, Mo.
Yeah, sure. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Okay, so screen. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm sure you guys can see my screen, yes? Okay, so what we're gonna do today is kind of pretty simple to understand and pretty easy to implement, and it doesn't really need you to kind of, go backwards and forwards understanding it. Once you understand it, you can do it, kind of repetitively. It's very easy. It's a great trick, censoring audio and video in Premiere Pro or using Premiere Pro. For example, if you'd like to censor sensitive information, whether it be audio information or whether it's video information, how do you go about doing this in a very simple and easy manner that really won't break the bank? So we're going to do a few little tips and tricks, making you understand how to do it in a very, very easy way. Again, you don't have to be an experienced user for this, but a lot of people don't even know these sorts of things exist. They've seen things exist, but they didn't know how to use them. So let's go into this. Now, and I'll show you what I've created so far. So there's just a few kind of little sequences that I've created. So I'm not going to go into how the sequences are created. Very simple to understand. And I've got a few sequences, and the very first sequence, if you look at it, it's called lock off. So I'm just going to mute the audio for now, and I'm going to just kind of scrub through, and you'll see that it's just a person doing an interview. The camera is very locked off. So there's no need to bother about, where the person's face is going to move or anything of the sort. So what do we do when we actually, kind of have to censor this video? Is there a way to kind of censor this video or her face? So what most people try to do is they try all sorts of blur effects and so forth, but we're looking at the traditional censoring method. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly just duplicate that video and put it on top. So I've got one video on top of the other, so it's exactly the same video, one on top of the other. And I'm going to go into my little effects tab, which is down here on my workspace. It might be different for your workspace, it might be up here, wherever you wanted it to be. And I'm going to type in the word mosaic, M-O-S-A-I-C. Let me see, sorry, my spelling just sometimes is just horrid. S-A-R-M-S-A. Let me see if I can see if I've got it. Okay, cool. So if I go to stylize and mosaic, so you're going to see a lot of effects here that you might not have. These are third-party plugins, but I'm just going to use the simple stylize mosaic, and I'm just going to put it onto the top video. And the moment we put it onto the top video, kind of presto, hey, guess what? We have a complete pixelation on the top layer, but we actually don't want it to kind of cover the entire area. We want it to cover, the person's face. So how do we go about doing that? Now, what we need to try and understand is, let's look at first, where is that person's face? So I'm just going to go into the opacity, and I'm going to bring the opacity down so I can actually clearly see where her face is. So I can see that her face is in this region. And what I'm going to do here is, having selected the uppermost layer, I'm going to go to this, this little rectangle tool or the pen tool, or really anything. For now, I'll use the rectangle tool, which is going to create a mask for me. So if I click it, I will get this mask. Here is my mask, right? And I want to kind of make it big enough to fit the entire person's image. And I'm just going to kind of drag across very loosely right now. It doesn't have to be perfect. We'll try and just get it a little bit more perfect or cleaner a bit later. And we're just gonna, at this point, just kind of just play it back to see that it's covering everything and she's not moving out of that area. And at this point, we're looking fine. I'm going to go back to my effects controls, and I can see my mosaic happening here. And I've got things like horizontal blocks and vertical blocks. So I'm going to firstly get the opacity right up, so we know we're blocking her. And if this is fine for you, then it's fine. You can actually stay here and say, all right, this is great. This is where I want to stay. But that doesn't look too nice. So we're just going to increase that. And this is kind of gives you that effect where you kind of squint at the screen and you're like, I know who that person is, but you don't really know. And that's what we get. And that mask is looking good, but it's a little bit kind of sharp on the edges. So we do have a mask feather option, which we can just kind of soften out the edges a little bit so that it blends quite nicely into it. I'm just going to kind of go down into about there and see. Okay, that's cool. And if you'll notice that that mask remains on screen, if I press playback on there, however, the mask is gone. Now you can see the person's face is completely pixelated. Should you actually want to make it a bit more pixelated, maybe it's something very, very sensitive information wise, we can kind of do that, and we've got really great censored video. So that's the first tip on how to create the video. So very important to understand. Should we not, a lot of people make the paramount mistake here where they take this mosaic and put it onto the original layer. So they do this, and then they can't find the rest of the person. So they do a mask once again. And if I do a mask here, watch what happens. So I'm just going to go here. Can you see that? And I'm going to do that. And you'll see that I'm going to get this sort of effect. If I play it, I'm just going to hide that, open it up, and I'm going to go here. What I find is that you're going to get a very similar effect if you drop it onto the original layer. The problem I find is that this mosaic moire pattern kind of on the renders sometimes can break edge pixels, and they're very fine in breaking. Some people don't notice it, but if you're doing it for TV, you send it out to TV output or wherever it is, very high output areas, you're going to have some edge pixel breakage. And that's the reason it's nice to do it on a separate layer so that the underlying layer remains original and it doesn't have any issues. So I'm just going to take that mosaic away from there, go back in there, and I've got this crispy edges, which I want for the original. I don't want to have an effect on an original layer. This is kind of working with After Effects. You don't want to place anything on an original layer. You're going to use things like solids and so forth. So that's the first way to do it. The second way, well, actually, that's the first kind of shot we're going to look at doing it on. The second shot is a shot that actually, if you look at this, you can see it's beginning to, there's a bit of a tilt on that camera. So again, I'm just going to mute that audio. And this time, I need to see what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of just, again, sorry, let me just delete that. And just get that. And put that above that. And what I'm going to do is go back home. I'm going to find out where the mask needs to begin. So you can see as we move up, it's going to need to move. Now, in this particular kind of situation, you have to look at what are you actually going to do in this case. So if I draw a mask out, right? Now you will see, let me undo that. Before I draw the mask, you can see there's nothing here that can be keyframed beside opacity, not even opacity right now, but you can keyframe it later. But if I draw a mask, it opens up all the keyframe functions, which are the stopwatches, which essentially makes you move, whatever you want to move value-wise. So I'm just going to drop that mosaic on right here, do what I did before, and I'm going to bring down the opacity again. So I just want to see what it looks like. And then I'm just going to kind of draw the mask at a point where it covers her entire face. So that's very important to do. Go to the point where it completely obscures the person's face, or whatever the sensitive material is. Maybe it's sensitive graphic material that you want to cover or something. And let's go there. Now we know that's the end position, and we know at this point it's going to begin here, and that's not what we want. So What we can do here is we can go down here. You got the mask path. So if I go to the mask path and I go in and I kind of do that, and then I go further in and I do that and I do that, right? So what's going to happen? Can you see that animated mask? It's changed values from here to here. So that's what we need to do. So right here, I'm going to actually take it off screen completely. And as soon as her face begins to come, let me just get rid of these keyframes, right? Get rid of those. Okay, so as soon as her face actually comes onto screen, so I want to use a dual layered kind of technique because the camera is moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to obscure her entire face, and I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit, which I can do by, instead of having to track the mask or to create keyframes, what I can do is I can go to the opacity and set it to 0 right at the beginning. I'm sorry, I should have done it right at the beginning. Okay, so that's 0. That mask is not showing right now. And at this point, I'm going to set another keyframe and put it out here. And now I'm going to, at this point, get my opacity to completion. So let's look at what happens. So you can see at this point, it's beginning to show a little bit of a face, which is not what we want. But what we can do is also go and keyframe these horizontal blocks. So as I'm moving forward, and I'm just going to move forward 1 frame at a time, like so. And I'm going to make those blocks a whole lot bigger. I'm just going to go forward, and I'll define it a little bit better and clean it up a little bit better. That's fine. That end result is fine. What didn't work for me was the opacity. So at this point, I just want to see what the opacity values are at this point. So let's just zoom out of that. I'm just going to get rid of that opacity value, or actually move it backwards. And let's see how we look here. That's better. And we're going to kind of just get rid of that opacity. And we're going to get that opacity a little bit like this, like that. That's where we want to be. And that's it. Absolutely spot on. So if we look at it, and I'll just bring this up to full screen for you. You do that, and we've got this. And of course, you know, at this point at the bottom, you can see that that mask is at this point. And if we don't want this at that point, it's very, very easy to change. We just go back into the mask itself, and we go in, into the mask itself, and we look at the mask path. So at this point, the path is not supposed to be where it's sitting. So let's make that mask a whole lot smaller. So we go to the path. When you click path, everything disappears, and people get so confused. Just click the word mask again, and it will reappear for you. So let's make the mask really tiny, the shape really tiny at this point. And as we move forward, let's make, we're really just going to go to the endpoint and just kind of make the mask the shape of the subject or the area you want to cover. And if we look at this now, we kind of, that's much better. Now we're talking business. So once again, I'm going to go back in, give you a full screen preview of this. And let's go back, and let's go back again, and let's do it. So there you go. You got that mask coming in. And the reason you might have seen this kind of mask almost kind of animating up here is because we changed the horizontal and vertical blocks. If you don't want that, you can just simply say, okay, I know what my final horizontal, and so I'm just going to take those away and leave it at its final. And I'm going to do that, and watch what's going to happen. We're not going to get that kind of banding and like wavy effect. So let's just go back up to full screen, go back to the beginning and play back. And you don't have that sort of banding. So that's how you do that. When we work with something else like movement, right? So we've got some sort of crazy movement going on here. And you got these, let me just mute the audio. You got these guys, motorcycle guys. The technique is exactly the same. You know, if it's not needed to be tracked in After Effects or anything like that, you can just kind of drop this in, put it out here, take the opacity, look at what actually you need to cover and how big an area you need to cover. And then you would, now this is pretty interesting because you've got two riders, right? So I'm going to go and create a mask, a really quick mask over this guy, right? So I'm just going to kind of put that there. And I just want to find when he comes into shot. So he comes into shot about there. So I can just kind of move that mask over. I'm just going to obscure his, maybe his helmet as an his helmet as an example. Just kind of doesn't really matter. Once the mosaic is in, you don't really see the shape too much. And then I'm going to go in, and I'm not going to worry about where that mask was. I'm going to look at where this other rider comes in, and then I'm going to go in, deselect mosaic, go back and create another mask. So it's mask number 2. You'll see mask number 2. Make sure you deselect off that particular effect. So we've now got 2 really cool masks doing this. And now when we want to work with either mask, it's very simple. Click on the word mask 1, and well, sorry, let me not move that because that's where he came in, right? So that's where he is. That's mask 1. We're going to change that horizontal and vertical a little bit. And of course, you're not seeing anything because it's, the opacity's doing stuff. So we're going to do that. So now you really can't see him. So we're going to make the blocks quite tiny. So it looks like he's obscured. Okay, that's great. So if I play that, I have to track that naturally. And now let's go back to mask number 2, which is where the other rider comes on. And we're just going to kind of do the same thing. We're going to go to horizontal, and we're going to go to, let's just see, what was mask 1? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Everything's fine there. Okay, and then what we'd need to do is we would need to keyframe the mask's position so that we follow the rider. So once again, back to the mask. Let's go forward. Sorry, that's mask 2. Let's go forward and go about there. All right, so let's look at what mask 2 does. We want it to be here. All right, so let's look at if that mask is, just keep watching that, and it's kind of picking up almost intelligent, not really, but it's trying. It's not really tracking. You got to manually keyframe. You can keep going through on your own manually. It'll keep adding these keyframes here for you. Keep going forward. And at that point it kind of breaks. So we push it back up there and about there. So it's a manual process that you have to do, but it's kind of fun. It's pretty interesting. So that breaks there, as you can see it into anything. There was a few frames. So it's always great to go 1 frame at a time. I'm just not going 1 frame at a time. Okay, so that's rider 1. And then we come into rider number 2, which is mask number 1, right? Rider number 1 is mask number 1. And we're going to go put that there. I'm sorry. Let me see if I did the masks right. Yeah, actually, I kind of went around the other way. So let's go in there. Okay, and that's going to just kind of follow him there. Let's move forward a little bit. And oops. So essentially what we're doing is we kind of, I think I must mix up the masks a little bit, but you have to do 2 separate masks and then keyframe those masks out so that each mask follows the rider. So you've got mask number 1 up here, right? And you've got the path. So if I move that path down there, it appears there. And then we're going to look at mask number 1, which is already on the rider. So mask number 1 was the one that I actually didn't do correctly. So I'm going to just get rid of the keyframes, go back in, and tick on mask 1, and tick on the path. And I'm just going to kind of start it about so, go forward, and it's just very loosely kind of grab him. As you can see, mask, this path, this person's obscured already. So if we look at this now, let's imagine they started here, right? I'm just going to tick off. You'll see that they're both obscured. So that's a great way to censor your video. It's very nice. You can do it in After Effects and track it and stuff, but it's not essential if you're doing just kind of YouTube work and stuff that's not too complex. The last area of censorship would be audio censoring. Now, let's bring up the audio.
There's sort of a mandatory retirement at age 5. They start.
Okay. So maybe she was using some cuss words, or maybe she was talking about something very sensitive, and we're just going to add a quick audio track. So we've got an audio track. So we're just going to bring her interview down to that track. And let me just maximize everything. And I'm going to go into File, New, and you'll see I've got the words bars and tones. I'm just going to click bars and tones and click OK. You don't need to choose anything from here. It's all fine. If I double click it in my source monitor, my source monitor is there. If I should be working. Okay, let's just put this into a new sequence. All right, this is what bars and tones are. So if I play it back and just drop the volume down, so you get that. So it's great to, you know, I'm just going to kind of grab that, and I'm going to only the audio. So I just want the audio because for some reason it's not appearing in my source monitor, but I'll just copy that over, just the audio. And I'm going to go back into that lock-off shot, and I'm just going to kind of quickly paste that and bring that here, right? So it would be better if it was in my source monitor. I'm just going to try and put it up in there. Okay, there we are. So let's look at the source monitor and the waveform and see if it's going to work. Yeah, I've got a waveform. And all these little lines, I'll just drop that down. Yeah, see these little kind of lines that you got here? These are the, you know, the bars and tones. So all those ones on the top, those little blocks are bars and tones as well. So we want to add in areas where she kind of says, whoops, you know, what have I done, or stuff like that. So I'm just going to put this in the source monitor, right, and delete the bottom one. Cool. Okay, so let me grab some from here. Okay, I'll put an out point, and I'll bring the audio down to this track, which is here. So if I look at it,
the dogs are generally retired when.
So naturally, we need to bring this audio level down, you know, in the audio track mixer, or we can just do it manually from here. We can cut that audio. So let's just zoom up, and what we can do, and I'm just going to resize real quick so that we can see the timeline a little better. And I'm just going to kind of go in, and I'm going to look at the audio waveform down here. And at this point, I actually don't want audio. So I'm just going to cut it out down here with the razor blade tool. And if I go in here, I now get...
The dogs are generally retired when...
You know, so I'm just going to copy that, duplicate it, let them play again, and duplicate it.
There's sort of a mandatory retirement.
Duplicate it. And I can make this one maybe a little bit smaller, so it's a very quick beep. This one's the kind of quick beep. And then I'm just going to quickly cut up these like so, and so, and just delete. So we're deleting the original audios. You can also, if you don't want to delete it, you can cut them up. And what you could do was go in and just right click where you've cut and say, let me just redo that. Right click, and you can say, you know, enable, tick the word enable, so it'll disable that audio immediately at that point. So that disables the audio, but you still got that audio clip if you need. It's always still there because it's non-destructive, so that doesn't really matter. And if we look at it now, and if we play it back, let's go back to the end.
The dogs are generally retired when are there's sort of a mandatory retirement age 5.
So that's where she says F something. It sounds like an F. So we'll just kind of bring that audio down here, like so. Just kind of rejoin that audio up here. I'll just enable that. And then just cut this one. And do that, and we're good to go. I'll just delete that real quick. Do that about here, and just enable that. Okay, cool. So that should be about at the right place. And if you go back.
The dogs are generally retired when are there's sort of a mandatory retirement at age 5. They start racing at about 1.5 years old, and they are no longer needed.
So basically that, you know, it's very loosely done, it's very quickly done. We don't have too much time for this, but essentially to, you know, censor your audio, you have bars and tones. Most people go out there and look for it on the net, looking for that tone sound. It's actually called a test tone sound. And once that is there, your entire thing is completely sorted out, and it's done. Very, very easy to do. Simple. So that's just basic censoring audio and video in Premiere Pro and no other program.
That is very cool.
Thank you.
So do you have to cut out the original audio, like on that last example?
No, you don't need to cut out the audio. So if we go back into this, all right, so I'm just going to undo everything that I've done, right? So just undoing it with Command Z, which is an undo. And I'll just kind of just delete this and just extend it backwards. So it's original. This is now the original, right? So let's talk about these two clips out here. And we don't want to actually, let me just delete tracks that we don't need so that we can see just those tracks we do. Okay, so what we want to do is, for example, underneath this, so I'll just kind of cut up here or cut up here and then cut up there and cut up there. Normally you could delete them like so, or if you don't want to delete them, because remember, if you delete them and you think you've made a mistake, all you need to do is just trim backwards and it becomes the original again. There isn't really a cut in
really lost it.
Yeah, but if you don't want to delete them, you can just right click on it and hit this enable or disable this enable button, and it says disable. So that audio is now completely disabled. There is no audio coming through. So if I play this clip,
mandatory retirement at age 5,
right, where she's talking,
they start racing at about.
And if I right click and I hit this enable or disable button, it turns black, and it's essentially you muting that piece of audio. So you can do it in one of two ways. You can delete the audio. I prefer deleting the audio because sometimes there's so many cuts that you've made that need to be muted or disabled that you maybe forget one. By cutting it out, I can see an empty space. So for my personal workflow, that works a little bit better compared to, you know, something else that you know you could do, like just disabling the audio. But some people like disabling it. There are places you would disable it at, certain projects, etc. So yeah, that's just simple stuff.
Yeah, that really makes sense.
And the whole thing back on the video changing, where you're using the mosaic, that's one of those things that people don't, especially when they're starting out, think of using the mosaic. They try and use a blur or something like that, and the mosaic actually, I think, is a much better looking. It's very obvious that that's what you're doing. There's not just something on the camera lens or something, and to me it looks more professional to use the mosaic effect rather than just throw on a heavy, you know, Gaussian blur with a feather on it or something.
Yeah, what I feel is that with the mosaic effect, unlike a Gaussian blur or any sort of blur, there's less processing power needed on the render. So, you know, you don't need to bake it in too much. It's a very simple effect that kind of blends with the pixels already, and it's very simple. It's not resource heavy. It doesn't eat up too much. Well, it's like a quarter of a quarter of 1,000%. So you don't even notice. It's, as you might have seen, when I went to the timeline and I did this, I don't see my render area turn red or anything. You know, I don't need to render that out. It's full speed playback. So, you know, even if it's 4K, you'd still get full speed playback because it's such a very tiny effect. It's nothing major. It's not called, you know, Gaussian blurs are called, or those things are called computational effects, because you have to compute the mix between themselves and the video layer they placed on or the video beneath it. The mosaic effect is not a computational effect. It's an effect that just lays on top of it and does what it's supposed to do. And there's quite a few like these that we'll maybe go into on a day when we do effects. But this is a simple way to, just do some cool intros, and
that's great. That's great. So Neil, what have you got for us?
Okay, mine is just a little a couple ways to do a little fun stuff with text. And so let's cut over. Now, of course, you can have text on a screen like this, but at times it's really kind of nice to be able to do something that is kind of reversed from that, and say something more like this. And or here, and I'll play just for a little bit. And you notice I've got a little speeded up ocean beach scene playing in the background. And then we'll come up here. I've got another clip behind it with people walking around. But how did I get from here to there? Well, okay, so I've got my graphics layer on top here. And as you can see right here, that's just, I've got a Lumetri color effect there, which I'm not actually using. I could easily delete. But if we click on the text line here for Yippee, and we can see I've got a fill and I've got it just white. Don't set the color, just leave it white and it'll be fine. Set your size and location of the text. And now what we want to do in order to, one way to get this background, and it's got an awful lot of variety that you can end up adding to it. I'm not going to go into it now, but you can get a lot of variety added into it. And this is by going up to your effects bin, which mine is right up here, and just typing in track, and then you see the track matte key effect pop up here. And you can either double click or you can drag and drop, but you put that on the clip below what you're going to use to apply essentially a mask, a matte to the clip. So we have applied it here. And if I come up to my effects controls, we can see the track matte key effect here. Now, when it comes in, normally it's set for none and either matte luma or matte alpha, depending on the way it goes. And so it doesn't, it's not making any change. But what we're going to do here is we're going to note again that this is put on the clip itself underneath the graphic, and the graphic has this white text. So now I can come over here in the track matte key and my effects control, and where for the matte or the mask, I'll click on video 2, and that means it's taking the mask from this track, from video 2 track. And I want the matte luma. I could actually, for this one, use matte alpha and it would work. But normally I go ahead and use the luma. And this way, now I am using the text that is in the clip here, in my essential graphics clip. I'm using the text there to mask what is below it and reversing everything. So that way we have this interesting setup going here. Now, I'll get into track matte and other things because there's a lot of things I use that for in color that's really spiffy. But this is one of the ways that you can use it to go ahead and make video text blocks that have motion to them, to the actual text itself. And if you go ahead and right click and nest on, as it's called, on one of these things, you can then duplicate that off and use it and apply it anywhere you want as a text effect. But I'm going to show another way, and it's a simpler way, but it doesn't necessarily have as many useful functions, but to do the same thing. So we're going to come down here, and where I don't have a track matte effect, as you can see, there's on the clip here in the effects controls, there's no track matte effect. I have simply on my essential graphics panel, I have created a shape 1 here, which is black, and it is just filled with black, and I could fill that with any color I wanted, actually. It could be red or not. And the size is this one right here. When you hover over the various little icons here, you see this one, it says toggle animation for scale. Well, that tells us that this is the scale. This is the size. So if I just slide that to the right and bring it down, you can see I'm scaling it up or down. I just made it so it's big enough to block the whole screen. And then after I created the shape, I created the text. And notice the text is on top up here in the layer stack for the essential graphics, because if it's on the bottom, then this doesn't work. The text has to be on top. And I filled again with white, but notice I've got these 2 buttons down here, mask with text, because prior to clicking on the mask with text, at first, this is what we see. I just have a white text just like normal. But now if I do mask with text, it will at first appear like this image here, where, yeah, you can see the text, but you still see the rest of the image. But if I click invert, this is what turns that entire shape into a complete mask of the whole image and gives me the text shown in this. And as you can see, the ocean's moving and also my text is moving because I went ahead and set an animation for position here, where at the beginning of the clip, I adjusted the position here, the vertical position of the clip, and set the and click toggle animation for position so that this icon is blue. And then I went to the end of the clip and I reset this parameter, which is the height, where I wanted it to be. And so now when we go through to beginning, and you note as I play the clip, my text is scrolling up. Now, if you want to, you can, when you size the shape, you could size the shape for matching your text and either leave it with the text if you're not moving it, or you could do something where you link the two of them together and move them together. But there's a lot more things we can get into a little later on. But this is just a couple quick ways of doing masking with text. One uses the track matte effect out of the effects panel, applied to a clip below the text, and the other one simply uses the mask with shape options in the essential graphics panel, where we make the shape first and make it either big enough to cover the text or the whole screen in this case, then add the text and do the mask with text and invert. So that's a couple ways to get so that you have text that does something a little different than just having white or colored text on a screen. And it's kind of fun to have the people walking through your characters in the background there.
Okay, thank you, Neil. That was fun. Anything anything you want to add, Mo? Or uh-oh, we don't have your sound. I can see his mouth moving.
Well, I'm sorry, I muted myself accidentally.
Yeah.
Oops. So that was really great, Neil. I think that was a seriously cool. I didn't know that in the Essential Graphics panel because I don't use Essential Graphics panel because I work a lot in After Effects. So I just do it there using blend modes and stuff. So that was really great. I think a lot of people would love to see this. So perhaps in the future, and it's a suggestion, maybe we can do an episode on that sort of stuff using concentrating on the essential graphics panels. I don't know how to mask with an invert function because like I say, I don't use it. So thanks so much. I actually learned something new, and yeah, that was spot on.
Awesome.
Enjoyed it thoroughly. Yeah, I was busy trying it while Neil was doing it, and I was failing dismally. Yeah, I had the water come through the words, and the words disappear. And I'm like, oh my god, I didn't see the word invert. So thank you. I'm gonna practice. That's great. Really great.
Very cool. Well, this has been a great show, everyone. I want to remind everybody they can join our community to know when we're going live again by going to the Creativity-Hive Inner Circle Facebook group. Search for that in Facebook and ask to join, and then you'll know the next time we're going live and other upcoming fun events that we're going to be doing. So, see you later.